Well, very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Allen. I'm a state senator representing the West Side, Hollywood, Coastal South Bay, and Santa Monica Mountains communities of Los Angeles County. And I want to just thank you all for coming this afternoon, and our friends from the press. Just so pleased to be joined here with a number of stakeholders and supporters of SB 601, which recognizes the need for California to step up during a time of retreating federal policy. So with us here today is my good friend, co-author of our bill, our assembly partner, Assemblymember Ash Kalra. We have two sponsors of the bill, California Coastkeeper Alliance, Defenders of Wildlife, and we're so excited also to be joined by Enviro Voters, which is a strong supporter of the bill. So just to give you a sense of the history, since 1948, federal standards have been in place to limit pollution into waters across the nation. And that was first enacted into what's called the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1948. It was then later amended into the Federal Clean Water Act of 1972. And those laws have provided federal protections that have safeguarded sensitive ecosystems in our precious water supply for decades. And through a robust permitting process that's implemented by the state, the Clean Water Act regulated if, how, and when the industrial, municipal, or other business facilities could discharge pollutants into our waters of the United States. My favorite acronym, WOTUS. Now, so this was a system that was working well. Californian businesses and industry and local governments all complied with the law, and it safeguarded our waters, the safety and the health of our waters. But then, of course, less than a year ago, May 2023, the Supreme Court ruled in the infamous Sackett v. EPA decision, abruptly changing which waters fell under the WOTUS definition, undermining and rolling back these really important pollution protection measures for so many of our streams and wetlands. These are protections, of course, that they had and we had enjoyed for decades. And of course, so that was last year. We know how wild things have been over the past few weeks as the federal administration has taken a number of really deeply concerning actions, rolling back aspects of federal engagement, federal policy, federal protections of our climate and our environment. And so it's become so clear to us that while environmental standards are really coming into the crosshairs of the current administration, and so we've got to step up. We can't take for granted that the federal government is always going to do what they've traditionally, historically done under Republican and Democratic presidents, protecting our environment, protecting our waterways. So we certainly have some state laws in place to regulate water quality standards, but they've been developed and implemented based on interpretations of the Clean Water Act prior to the Sackett decision. So our whole system is sort of predicated on the idea that you've got the federal government there under the Clean Water Act acting as a tent pole of protection. So this bill is significantly important, but it's really simple at its core. All it does is it rolls back the clock to before the Sackett decision to maintain the protections that these waters have always enjoyed for decades, and enshrines a new framework into state law and empowers the State Water Resources Control Board with tools to efficiently implement and enforce this framework. The bill establishes some new definitions and clarifications to capture all the waters that were previously considered waters of the U.S. prior to the Sackett decision. It holds them to the protection standards in place that were prior to the decision. The bill also will help to future-proof our drinking water standards by having the Water Board quickly adopt the standards that were in place prior to the current federal administration. Again, it's just about making sure that we are at the same protection level that we were on May 1st, 2023. These are steps that we need to take as a state now. With the void being left by realigning federal priorities, it's clear to me that we and our friends here that we just can't wait to act. Water is an incredibly precious resource. We need clean water to drink, to grow our food, to safely bathe and swim in, support healthy ecosystems and the environment. We are holding our water agencies to high water quality standards. And quite frankly, one of the major things that the Clean Water Act did was ensure that people who wanted to pollute and discharge pollutants into waters weren't and ruin our waters weren't doing so willy-nilly without regulation, and thus making it so much worse for the rest of us, including expensive for our water agencies to clean up the damage. So this is about protecting ratepayers, It's about protecting our water supply, and it's a common sense measure that simply restores the protections that our waterways have always enjoyed since 1948. So I'd like to now bring to the podium my good friend and colleague from the Assembly, our partner in crime on the Assembly side, the co-author of SB 601, representing the 25th Assembly District, Ash Kalra.
Yeah. Partner in environmental justice.
Yes.
And I want to start by thanking Senator Allen for his continued leadership in not just in the environmental space, but specifically here with SB 601 and how important this is. It may be, what it does in text may be pretty simple. What it does in intention is profoundly, profoundly important. And so I'm happy to join all of you today in support of the Right to Clean Water Act, a bill that will ensure the human right to safe, accessible water in California. And there is no California without water. It forms the cornerstones of our ecosystems, quenches the fields that grow our food, and keeps every one of our approximately 40 million residents healthy and hydrated. That is why when regulations governing water standards are weakened and undermined, it should be recognized as not just a threat to water quality, but overall quality of life, and frankly, a threat to our state. Unfortunately, as was mentioned by Senator Allen, a Supreme Court ruling has stripped federal protections from many of our most precious wetlands and streams, each a crucial linkage in a complex water network that undergirds every animal, every plant, every human being in our state. And it's critical that California takes decisive action to reestablish and maintain comprehensive water protections, especially for those waters that have already lost them. My colleague, Senator Allen, deeply understands this imperative, and I'm glad to and proud to co-author SB 601 alongside him and in partnership with these incredible organizations and environmental advocates. As the most populous state, California is tasked with one of the most complex water balancing acts in the nation. Not only must it address day in and day out a myriad of water needs, but now it must do so without that expected federal support. Again, we've had bipartisan support in this matter for really generations, and we can't count on that anymore. The current administration has made it clear that they intend to unravel all manner of environmental protections, including ones that place the most basic limits on pollution and environmental exploitation. Now, I'm not new to this in terms of considering legislation that contrasts what's happening at the federal level. During the first Trump administration, I was elected in 2016, and during that first term of mine, I had a feeling that the administration was going to start to pull us out of these long-standing acts and treaties that we've been a part of. We had been a part of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act for a century under Republican and Democratic presidents and administrations. But while my bill was making its way through the legislature, the Trump administration pulled us out of that treaty. And so we passed the California Migratory Bird Protection Act. Unfortunately, it expired on January 20th of this year because we figured, hey, if he's elected to a second term, he'll be gone by January 20th, right? We didn't anticipate the term would start anew this year, so we reintroduced AB 454 to put back in place that protection. And so it's an example of the kinds of things that we have to do and have precedents for. Because that was signed into law, and industry, as Senator Allen was saying, is used to complying with these environmental protections that are still allow some of our global industries to thrive. So whether it's about the environment or biodiversity, labor rights, or criminal justice, know that California will put our residents first and stand up to the federal government's lack of accountability for its harmful actions. And so I'm excited to continue supporting SB 601 and ensure that our state has the tools it needs to recognize and affirm one of our most foundational truths: water is life for each and every one of us. Thank you, Senator Allen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ash. And thanks for, Ash has been just such a great champion on so many key environmental issues, biodiversity, among many others. So now let's introduce Sean Bothwell from California Coastkeeper Alliance, who is one of our key sponsors.
Thank you, Senator and Assembly Member. My organization, California Coastkeeper Alliance, is extremely proud to be co-sponsoring this bill and really excited to work with both of you as we advance this legislation. We started writing this bill almost 2 years ago now, following the misguided Supreme Court case that we refer to as the Sackett decision. And the Sackett decision really looked at the issue of waters of the United States and what the scope of those would be. And that term, that definition of what a water of the United States is incredibly important because it dictates whether a waterway gets Clean Water Act protections or whether it does not. And the Sackett decision was very, East Coast wet climate biased, a bias that doesn't fit the reality here in California. Our Mediterranean climate doesn't allow for our rivers and streams and the creeks that flow into them to flow permanently. If you think about waterways down in Southern California in particular, there's many streams and rivers that don't have a permanent flow in them. And this Sackett decision would repeal and restrict some of the protections from the Clean Water Act. In California, though, even if someone were to pollute and put trash in, let's say, the Santa Ana River or other type of pollutants, that trash, those pollutants are still going to make it to our beaches and are still going to impact our children and Californians that come to recreate at our beaches. And so it's critical that our state protects our waterways in the same way that we have for the last 50 years. In California, we are very fortunate that we have delegated authority to implement the Clean Water Act. So what that means is our state agencies are responsible both to create federal Clean Water Act permits and for discharges of pollutants to waterways that are not WOTUS, like groundwater, for example. Our state agencies also create state permits. And so we came to them after the Sackett decision to really gauge their level of concern about permit shopping, about federal Clean Water Act permittees moving to the less stringent, more cumbersome state permits. And at the time, they felt like they could continue to regulate as usual. And that was interesting to us because our water keepers are on the ground. We're already seeing the impacts of this decision, where the regulated community and Clean Water Act permittees were arguing that they should no longer be regulated. So fast forward 18 months and the election, and now our state agencies are terrified of what's came already and the workload that's now been put on them, but also what's coming. Just yesterday, the Supreme Court made another decision that's going to really roll back and hamper Clean Water Act protections and for our agencies to do the job that they need to do. So we have been really working to streamline the water agency's ability to maintain the federal Clean Water Act permits and put them into state permitting regime with the same stringent requirements that are now required in federal Clean Water Act permits. SB 601 also ensures that folks that discharge pollutants into waters are permitted and continue to be permitted. It requires that standards that are set to improve our most polluted waterways, those standards remain in place. The bill helps streamline enforcement from our state so that they can continue to keep polluters accountable while also disincentivizing folks from, again, moving from the more stringent federal Clean Water Act permit to a state permit. And so overall, what this bill does is it maintains the protections that Californians have enjoyed for 50 years. It does not expand the regulatory regime onto others that weren't regulated under the Clean Water Act, but instead makes state agencies more efficient and can better permit in a cost-effective manner. Without Senate Bill 601, our state agencies are going to have a chokehold on them to be able to continue to issue permits and issue them with the same protections that we currently enjoy. So that's why we're excited. This is a really important bill. There continues to be attacks on the federal level on how we regulate our waters, and this bill is crucial, and I just want to applaud the Senator and the Assembly member for their leadership to introduce this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Next, we're going to hear from Ashley Overhouse from Defenders of Wildlife.
I echo Sean's thanks. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Assembly Member, for your support and leadership on this bill. Defenders of Wildlife is also proud to support SB 601 alongside California Coastkeeper Alliance on behalf of our over 300,000 statewide members and millions of members nationwide. As mentioned previously, in 2023, the Supreme Court issued a concerning decision, Sackett versus EPA. As concurring Justice Kagan commented, quote, "The majority opinion could use every letter of the alphabet and graduate to quadratic equations and still not solve its essential problem," end quote. In other words, the Sackett decision completely ignores the important role of science in policy and consequently has left California wetlands, streams, and other waters exposed to greater threats and worsening water quality. And unfortunately, as we saw just yesterday, more concerning decisions will likely continue to be made in the months and years to come that undermine federal water protections. California's freshwater ecosystems, from vernal pools to intermittent streams to our Bay Delta estuary, serve as essential habitat for wildlife, safe drinking water for communities, and nature-based solutions for climate resilience. And while this may seem obvious, it apparently was not for a majority of our Supreme Court, so it bears repeating. Our waters are connected. Our freshwater ecosystems, groundwater aquifers, rivers, wetlands, and other waterways are all interconnected. When there is a source of pollution, such as runoff from a dredge and fill, development project of a wetland, or urban toxics running into a storm drain, the impacts could be widespread, such as harmful algal blooms in the Delta 2 years ago, or the legacy mercury issue that still persists today from hydraulic mining. We are at a critical moment for our freshwater ecosystems. California has lost close to 90% of our historical wetlands in the Central Valley. Our Bay Delta estuary is rapidly declining in species and water quality, and these impacts and more are exacerbated by climate change. In short, the Sackett decisions limits our state's ability to protect our waters, as previously authorized under the Federal Clean Water Act, and our communities and wildlife cannot afford additional impacts. We must allow them time to recover and to move forward. In response to diminishing federal protections, California must bolster the state's water quality laws with a rule like SB 601, to ensure our state waters are safeguarded from these growing threats. This is not about just protecting today's ecosystems. It's about investing in a future where clean, healthy water is guaranteed for all communities and all wildlife. SB 601 gives clarity and efficient protections for the state at a time of regulatory and political uncertainty. Defenders of Wildlife again thanks the Senator and Assembly member for their leadership, California Coastkeeper Alliance for partnering with us to support this effort, and finally, the engaged community of water interests. They're looking to our great state to once again be a leader on environmental progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, and finally, Marquise Mason from Enviro Voters is our final speaker. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad we got to come in from the drizzle. My name is Marquise Mason with California Environmental Voters. Despite major water reforms stretching back 6 decades in California, providing safe and affordable drinking water alongside adequate recreational, industrial, and cultural supply remains a persistent challenge. 1 million people in California have a tainted water supply. In the state alone, there are 400 local water systems that do not have the ability to provide clean drinking water to residents, like rural communities and the school districts. Drought and groundwater overpumping has led to a sharp decline in river and reservoir quality as we continue to be hit on both sides by climate change with erratic seasonal variance and a warming climate. Public and private entities spend billions of dollars, upwards of 10 plus, on pollution, prevention, mitigation, and filtering for California's water, with hundreds of millions more in outstanding need annually. We can't afford to let regulated entities shirk responsibility or to let our regulatory protections backslide, wasting precious dollars on cleanup and abatement that could go to proactively manage our strained water supply. It is maddening to think that we may have to contend with increased risk of lead, mercury, arsenic, nitrogen, phosphorus, E. coli, fecal coliforms, etc., while state regulators battle inadequate permit authority and the climate batters us. This, coupled with a national affordability crisis, is a recipe for disaster. Wetlands and estuaries have been left in regulatory limbo due to the Sackett decision and are a crucial source of water purification for California. Not only do they absorb agents that contaminate fresh water, but they also act as a crucial barrier to salt water and protect flora and fauna that allow ecosystems to flourish. As you can see with environmentally destructive federal administration, now is not the time to allow our crucial protections to backslide. While the federal administration and the Supreme Court seek to dismantle critical protections, we must build up the ability of our state water board to ensure that the loss of federal protections will not disproportionately impact those who, still to this day, struggle to have clean water. California has 40 million lives to protect, and half a dozen states have already risen to the challenge of the Sackett decision. Restoring critical protections of formerly federally protected waters is only the beginning of what we need to rapidly accomplish this year. This is even more timely, as we've seen with the SCOTUS deregulating sewage discharge, which is really gross, honestly. While the President Trump and his cadre of corporate polluters fiercely work to make you all sicker, poorer, and less safe, we will fight back with the might of the fifth biggest economy in the world, acting as a critical bulwark to provide a dignified and prosperous life for millions of Americans. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you so much for our supporters who are here today. We're counting on your help to get this across the finish line in the legislature. We've heard all the stories about how detrimental the situation might be if we don't take action now. Relaxing standards on those whose business model may include polluting our water only means that everyone else is stuck paying for the cost, both environmental and financial. And we know that it's our local jurisdictions that foot the bill for cleaning the pollution, for paying for mitigation, and then our native plants and animals suffer, and potentially humans suffer as we don't have adequate clean water for them. And again, it's so important to reiterate that the standards that are in SB 601 are standards that businesses have been held to by federal law for years, for decades. They know how to comply with them. They have complied with them. They know how to make business work with them in place. So we've got this uncertain time with federal regulators, favorable and unfavorable court decisions, realigning priorities from top officials. So we think we need to really we need to act now and not sit idly by. This is a meaningful, actionable step to protect and future-proof our waters in a permanent fashion. I just really appreciate everyone for being here today, and we're happy to take whatever questions people may have. So, yeah.
Senator, I'm Nicole from Politico.
Thanks for being here.
How do you see this bill as different from SB 1? And if you've heard from the water agencies on this bill, and any thoughts on what about this bill?
Yeah, unlike it's a much more narrowly tailored bill. I supported SB 1. That was an important effort, obviously unsuccessful ultimately, but this is strictly tied to the protections of the Clean Water Act pre-Sackett.
Okay, and then also this moment is pretty politically precarious, just with Trump's interest in California water, and you can kind of balance that relationship. So just wondering your thoughts on that, like if this bill will get in the way of that relationship between California water.
Again, this is just about restoring protections that we've always had, including under Trump 1. This doesn't. This is really about discharge. Ultimately, it's about making sure that we can hold polluters accountable before they discharge pollution. If you care about water supply, as we do, and the president says that he does, you got to care about making sure it's clean water supply, right? For farmers, for personal use, and everyone else. So this is going to help all of our water needs, and I hope that the folks in Washington recognize that this is actually helpful to ensuring that the state has access to a clean and robust water supply. Eitan, nothing? All right. En español? You guys do Telemundo too, right? All right, we'll do one afterwards. Well, listen, really appreciate everyone being here and appreciate your attention to this, and also the wonderful staff that's been working really hard on pulling this together. Especially Laurel and Ben on my team on the comm side, and I'm sure Ash has got some staffers. Okay, Zena, yes, okay, yeah, great. No, we know that our staff puts in incredible work. Travis here as well, getting these bills across the finish line. So thank you all for helping to pull this together, and thanks for your flexibility coming in from the rain. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, great words.